Hi, so this is State Senator Paul Feeney, proud to represent the community of Medfield as part of 9 cities and towns in the Bristol and Norfolk State Senate District. We've actually had a really busy spring and early summer, obviously following last year where we had to deal with the pandemic and triaging really the most kind of emergent issues, dealing with public health and of course an economy that really sputtered last spring. We dealt with a lot of those issues last year with the hopes that this year we would return to some sort of normalcy in the state legislature. And it seems we're getting there. But what that left was, an enormous amount of legislation that we had to deal with this year to really start to kind of build back and to figure out all these systemic issues that existed prior to the pandemic, but really, were shown to be systemic issues that affected public health in communities throughout the Commonwealth. And now taking a look at our economy and figuring out, okay, what were we doing right? What were we not doing right? And how do we reinvest to make sure that working people can continue to survive and thrive in our communities, that small business owners can continue to, do what they do. They really are the backbone of many of our communities, and to figure out what the future of work is in the Commonwealth. So, we've been dealing with that now since the beginning of the session started in early January. And really, we've had a busy budget season. This is the time of year where both the House and the Senate are working in collaboration with the governor to figure out our next fiscal year's budget. And I always say that a budget is really a statement of our values. It's where we invest, vital and taxpayer resources and try and figure out, what programs and services will best serve our communities and the people that live in our district. So we got through that. Happy to report that we passed a balanced $47 billion-ish budget recently. It went to the governor's desk, and other than dealing with some of the governor's vetoes, we're well on the way towards cutting those checks and making sure that we're appropriating those dollars throughout the communities, throughout the Commonwealth, and to the most vulnerable among us. The budget is complicated, it's nuanced, and again, it really is a statement of our values. I, was particularly proud of a couple of things that I've been advocating for since I got elected into the Senate to represent the Bristol and Norfolk District. One of them has to do with homelessness and permanent supportive housing. I advocated strongly to reinstate $1 million for what they call the Home and Healthy for Good program, specifically money that should be directed towards permanent supportive housing units. I always say that we can end homelessness in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts by putting people in homes. And it's kind of this novel concept, right? That shouldn't be. For so many years, we used to just rely on the shelter model. And we saw last year in the midst of a public health crisis and pandemic that congregate care, that putting people in these congregate care facilities and these shelters probably wasn't the best way to keep them safe and to shelter folks. So we're looking at now reinvesting the language that, I successfully had inserted into our budget would reinvest into permanent supportive housing units to make sure that we're actually building, small homes and units for people to go and live, while at the same time getting the services they need, whether it's for substance abuse, mental illness, physical illness, or anything else that they need help with. So really proud of that. Worked very closely, of course, with our House delegation, Representative Garlick, who I just think the world of, who means so much to the community of Medfield and to me personally, as kind of a mentor as I came into the legislature. She's in a position of power in the House and in leadership, and is able to effectively advocate for change. And I always love working with her when it comes to fighting for the people of Medfield. Same with Representative Dooley, who I speak with frequently about some of our shared interests in making sure that the people of Medfield have strong leadership on Beacon Hill. Particularly this year, I was proud to pass an amendment into our fiscal year 22 budget that would provide $50,000 in funding to the Cultural Alliance, so that we can see finally that realization of the state hospital property, the old chapel, into a performing arts center, performing arts and education center. They have been doing an incredible amount of work in Medfield to make sure that we had a vibrant arts and culture scene. And I can't think of a better way than to actually cut the ribbon on this a couple of years down the road, up at the state hospital property, which we know has a storied history with so many people in the community, making sure that that property was reused and revitalized in a certain way. This money that we got in the budget this year will go towards rehabbing that chapel and making sure that we can actually build out that cultural center of performing arts. So very proud of that. You know, the budget takes a lot out of you. The long days, long weeks, but it's certainly something that, you know, when we get it done right, that's what we're paid to do. That's what we're elected to do, is to make sure we're elevating the voices of people throughout our district. In Medfield and the other cities and towns in the Bristol and Norfolk State Senate District, they reach out, they tell me where we should be spending this money, and we go to work advocating for it. So proud of this budget this year. We came a long way from last year, where we thought we were going to have a $6 to $8 billion shortfall. And this year we've seen that revenues are starting to exceed projections. Businesses are back up and running. People are spending money. Receipts are coming in. And we wanted to make sure that not only were we reinvesting in those places that we needed to reinvest in, but that we were also spending conservatively, that we didn't just take all this, you know, revenues, the excess revenues that we're starting to see, and spend it willy-nilly. It's important for us to make sure that we are reinvesting back into our stabilization fund, the state's rainy day fund. That makes, you know, that ensures that we have a good bond rating going forward. I have been appointed as the chair of the Joint Committee on Bonding this year, so it's very important for me, especially, to make sure that we have a good bond rating going forward, and to weather the storm. We don't know what the future of this pandemic is going to be. We don't know what our economy is going to look like if we have to roll back on some of these guidelines. So it's important for us to make sure that we have a safety net in the event that we have to go through this again. So very proud of the budget, and we've been working very hard on that over these last couple of months. We're very busy now that we kind of turned the corner on our budget. We have a couple of things that are facing us, you know, immediately. One is redistricting. You know, people, I don't think, realize once every 10 years, once the census is complete, those numbers have to be used to redistrict, meaning we have to redraw the lines on 40 state senate districts, on 160 state representative districts, on the congressional districts, on the governor's council districts. You know, when I talk to people about redistricting, sometimes their eyes glaze over. It's not really an interesting, you know, an interesting subject to talk about, but it is vitally important. When we look at the community of Medfield, which has 2 representatives and 1 senator, we have 1 congressman, Congressman Auchincloss, who has been working very, very hard to advocate for the needs of the community. We are faced with now, in the next couple of months, getting census numbers from the federal government, and may have to actually look at, you know, the way that the lines are drawn. That's from each precinct to, like I said, each House district and each Senate district. So we're meeting regularly with the chairs of the redistricting committee. They have undergone a public process. We want to make sure that, you know, people are able to weigh in on communities of interest. And I always say, and I've said it since before I got elected, that anytime you redistrict, it has to be absolutely void of politics. It is a sacrosanct process to make sure that people have a voice in local, state, and federal government. That means drawing lines that make sense, not based on who's in the district, not based on who represents them currently, but based on the needs of those communities, making sure that the community of Medfield and the surrounding communities within our region actually have a strong voice on Beacon Hill. That's why we must ensure that the public can participate in the redistricting process. I have ultimate faith in our chairs. Senator Brownsberger is the Senate chair, Senator Mike Moran is the House chair, and they are making sure to go out and actually meet in communities. They're holding public Zoom meetings. They're you know, allowing all sorts of stakeholders to weigh in to make sure that we have a diversity of opinion, a diversity of districts, and that, you know, ultimately the work product that comes out of the redistricting committee is something that we can be proud on voting for this fall. But the thing that people in Medfield should pay attention to is this all has to be done by October, by early November, actually. We have to get it done at least a year out constitutionally, a year out from our next elections, which will be in 2022. So again, not something that we always talk about. It only happens once every 10 years. It's not something a lot of people have on their radar screen, but it is vitally important when we talk about protecting democracy and making sure that we get the process right so that people have a voice in their government. The community of Medfield is not immune to what we've gone through over the last year. It has been a very challenging and difficult year as we work through a pandemic and a public health crisis. I know that divisiveness can be at an all-time high when we talk about things like masks and we talk about vaccinations. What we need to remember, though, is when we come together, we work best. We're all going through this together. Matter of fact, right now I've turned an upstairs spare room into a little bit of an office. Of course, I don't have air conditioning in, and it's a hot day that I'm recording this, but we've all gone through this, right? We've all tried to figure out how the kids can do hybrid schools, hybrid education. We've tried to figure out how to work from home. We've tried to figure out how to safely get into Boston or into other communities, down to Providence if you work outside of the town that you reside in, and transportation just isn't available. We've all gone through a pretty challenging year. And I always want to remind people that when we work together, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. And sometimes we need to put the divisiveness aside. We need to come together around shared values and common interests. And when we do that, we flourish. We're seeing that. I'm blessed to represent the town of Medfield in the state Senate. And I will tell you that I certainly have my values and my ideals that I will never compromise on. But at the end of the day, I'm also elected to make sure that I am putting Medfield in the best position to succeed. Our residents, our families, our small businesses, our locally elected officials. My job is to make sure that I'm working closely with our delegation in a bipartisan way, my colleagues in a bipartisan way, to ensure that Medfield is getting what it deserves and its fair share. I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do, but I can only do that because the people of Medfield actually empower me to do that. When you reach out and you call me, when you send me a text on my cell, when you send me an email, when you show up at my office hours, those sorts of things inform my actions going forward. When I hear from people in Medfield and they talk about the need to invest in our arts and culture in a community, when I hear from people in Medfield talking about the rising cost of housing and making sure that their families can actually stay in Medfield, that means something to me, right? So that informs the way that I advocate for our district going forward. And I would say to people, keep that up. There's a lot going on. We have billions of dollars in federal money that's coming to Massachusetts as part of the ARP, the American Rescue Plan Act. We are having hearings. I am meeting with people every single day throughout the district to make sure that that money that's coming from the federal government is spent efficiently and it's directed towards people that need it. So reach out to me if you have ideas on what we should be doing for that. One of the things that I've advocated for is to make sure that the essential workers that were so important last year during this public health crisis, that kept the buses running, the trains running, that kept our restaurants open, that kept our schools flourishing, the ones that kept our grocery stores open. Think about how many times you went into a grocery store last year and that clerk was there. Those people were stocking the shelves, while many of us were able to actually work from home or in a hybrid fashion and keep ourselves safe. They were deemed essential and they should be treated as such. I think it's important we should take some of those ARP monies that are coming from the federal government and direct them towards hazard pay and premium pay for the people that work so hard, the nurses, the firefighters, the police officers, the folks that work so hard on behalf of all of us in our community so we could stay safe. So it's going to be a very busy couple of months coming up in the state legislature. I would hope that everybody would stay tuned and stay in touch. You can easily reach me in my office at 617-722-1222 or send me an email at paul.feeney, that's FEENEY @masenate.gov. I hold regular office hours each month, and I look forward to getting back out in the community in person. We've been doing them by Zoom, but getting back out in the community in person like we frequently did and held office hours at the Medfield Public Library. Please reach out to us if there's anything I can do. Stay tuned, and really just as we get through this pandemic, we just again urge everybody, put divisiveness aside and come together for the benefit of our community.